Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Village of Mount Pleasant's Plan Commission meeting for October 19th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Bhatia, Hewitt, and Van Beckham are excused. So we have Meyer.
Here.
Driver.
Here.
Rissler.
Here.
Bozanovsky.
Here.
We've got the approval for the meeting minutes of September 21st, 2022.
Move to approve. We weren't here, so you're not gonna have a vote because there's not enough people
You
here.
can vote on it if you weren't in the meeting, as long as they look accurate. You don't have to.
I would.
You don't want to?
I don't want to do that.
Okay. Then we'll move those
Oh,
to
move
next
them.
meeting.
You should vote to table them then.
Okay. We'll move to table those.
I'll make a motion to move to table the minutes till the November meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next will be Resolution 11, 2022 Old Green Bay Road Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA 0122. Or did I skip one?
Well, we just have an update on the residential
Oh, okay.
districts that we've previously discussed. We're still working on proposed updates, so hopefully by end of year we should have some proposals in front of you guys. But
Okay.
just didn't want that one to drop off the agenda. So
Gotcha.
we're still working on it.
Okay. Then we will move to Resolution 1122.
Oh.
I can start walking through it while I reload the presentation. The applicant applied to change the village as part of the land use element of the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Racine County 2035, otherwise known as the plan, for 2.91 acres at the corner of Old Green Bay Road and County Line Road, from residential areas including churches, multifamily, to mixed residential/commercial. The applicant concurrently applied to rezone the property to B2, which is later on the agenda. The applicant believes the parcel's location at the intersection of two county trunk highways, the shallowness of the property make it unsuited for estate residential development and more suited for neighborhood commercial development. The village staff finds the amendment follows the goals, objectives, and policies of the plan, including the goals and objectives listed in your executive summary, such as promoting redevelopment, promoting coordination between land use and housing design that supports a range of transportation choices, encouraging development patterns that promote efficient and sustainable use of land. The proposed amendment, the village staff do not believe the amendment will lead to any detrimental environmental effects. There are some wetlands in the north corner of the property. However, the development could not fill those without permission from DNR. The proposed amendment is compatible with surrounding land uses. The staff agree that the parcel is unlikely for estate residential development due to two of the sides of the parcel fronting county trunk highways. Low to moderate intensity residential or commercial development is proper for this corner, would not negatively affect the surrounding estate residential uses. Specifically, if the comp plan amendment leads to a B2 zoning, that zone limits drive-through uses and large gas station uses to conditional uses. So we would expect that any commercial that did pop up on the property would not be annoying in someone's backyard. The surrounding roadways are sufficient to handle any proposed traffic from low to moderate intensity residential or commercial development. They could actually probably handle higher, so they're good there. And a 16-inch water main and an 8-inch sanitary sewer main both lie within Old Green Bay Road adjacent to the property. The staff find the proposed amendment would enhance economic development with the county. The village staff agree that the property is unlikely to develop limited to estate residential zoning. The applicant's request to allow low to moderate intensity commercial development on the property could set up uses to serve adjacent residential uses. Additionally, other existing commercial areas along County Line Road do not negatively affect the adjacent residential uses. There are some commercial properties east and west along KR, so there is some existing standard for a mixture of both in that stretch of highway. The village staff find the proposed amendment agrees with the recommendations of the regional land use plan, and Racine County recently upgraded County Line Road to 4 lanes from I-94 westwards, or the eastwards, through the Old Green Bay Road intersection, showing the area is prepared for slightly more intense uses than estate residential. With that, staff recommends the Plan Commission moves to approve Resolution 11, 2022. And as a final note, this was in front of the village board for a public hearing, and that would be late September, and there were no comments either way on it. So pretty cut and dry. No one's going to put up a 2,500 square foot home on the corner of two county highways when there's not a lot of land to set it back away from those highways. It's a pretty shallow lot, so makes sense to us.
All right, any questions of Sam? Is the petitioner here? Would they like to speak at all? No? Okay. And if no questions, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 11, 2022, Old Green Bay Road Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA 0122.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? And I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good luck. Next is 824th Street Site Plan Review SP 2022. Robin.
Hello. So this is from the case site plan from last month that we laid over to address some of the concerns. I'm happy to report that a lot of concerns have been addressed. And actually the application is significantly different from the one before, mainly because there's an addition of a 41,000? Yep. 41,000. Why am I building into the plan as well? So they're expanding that building, the P12 building. So upon our commentary talking about giving us plans to expand additional buildings and invest into the site, this one is significantly better because it invest in the buildings. They plan to relocate 35 to 50 engineering professionals from current Illinois facility, which is great because boo bears. Always good to have people moving up. The contents will consist of various tractor and driveline shops, lab and testing rooms, and associated support spaces. The intent of the addition will be for tractors and manufacturing assemblies. So the test stack is still there, and it is still under, WDNR environmental remediation. So this follows the village comprehensive plan. So as far as what we had concerns with last time, so in addressing the parking and access plan, they revised the code. They revised the plan to include sidewalks and/or multi-use pathways to surround the entire site. As far as parking, you believe that the parking is sufficient there. There's no absolute required parking for industrial sites. For the outdoor lighting plans, they submitted a photometric plan, which was largely compliant. Staff does say that there are a few minor drive and parking areas that don't have at least 0.5 foot candles of lighting, so the applicant will need to revise that and submit it to staff. The big one was landscape and screening. They did not have a landscape plan on the initial submission last month. They have submitted a landscape plan. They are going the wall. They're going to build a 6-foot decorated wall around the entire site. So one of the options for screening is a masonry wall, and also also needs canopy trees. So one canopy tree every 50 feet. So it's not just going to be bare and all that sort of thing. However, staff did comment that we did not have specific sort of design details on the wall at the time. The applicant has submitted those design details. We have not gone and reviewed them thoroughly yet to give you a particular kind of comment or anything like that, but they do have to meet the standard of the code. So the code says when a masonry wall is used to meet minimum screening requirements, it must be constructed of attractive, high quality, durable finish materials, such as brick, cast stone, decorative block, or stucco, over standard concrete masonry blocks. Color, texture, and type of materials used on masonry walls must be similar to compatible with the materials used on the principal building, and that we just did not consider a smooth, plain concrete wall to be compliant with that. They have updated it, and that it is more decorative. That I have seen. We just haven't kind of dug into it to see if it complies with that particular code. So that is one of the conditions as well. The submitted plans do meet the requirement for 90 canopy trees. So, and meeting with that, as far as the wall, that actually building that, in the industrial sort of district, M2, walls are permitted up to 8 feet, 10 feet with the approval of community development director. I don't think we would want to go that high or anything like that, but if there is a security, if the applicant has any sort of security issues or wants to have that, they can have a open, non-screening sort of kind of a topper on it or something like that. Nothing dangerous, but just to give it a little bit more height if they wanted to do that.
But not like chain link or anything.
No, not chain link. It would be like, you know, decorative like wrought iron or aluminum. The other major issue that was addressed the last time was the vegetative buffers. So that the applicant needed a 75-foot vegetative buffer for the top of the bank. The applicant has indicated that that is now on the site, with the exception of the portions labeled for the DNR access drive. So the DNR needs access to the site, both to get to the bluff as well as to check the areas of environmental remediation. So that access drive is exempt under access drive and viewing corridors portion of the code. So as far as the fiscal impact, that has changed since the last one. So the 42,000 square foot building addition will bring a significant boost in assessable value to the property over the current value of $1.1 million. That is just the building value. I felt kind of putting the land into that calculation would screw it up a little bit. So just the building value is $1.1 million. The proposed buildings would double the square footage of the buildings on the site. We would also assume that other site improvements, and such as the sidewalks, walls, all that sort of stuff, and landscaping would also increase the assessable value on the site. It will make it more attractive, all that sort of thing. Basically, the addition of this, and like basically addition of the building and continuation in the industrial business use is the near-term best case scenario for the mostly vacant property. According to the WDNR, the current remediation plan precludes possible conversion to commercial or residential, thereby limiting the potential value of those uses. The property owner could only consider such uses if they undergo additional remediation measures. Additionally, the village would need to update its comp plan to allow for those uses. So this expansion of the site's old use and relocating jobs back to the area is the best path forward, barring extremely significant amounts of reinvestment by both the property owner and the village. So barring, you know, a really big deal reinvestment and stuff like that, this seems to be like the best path forward. And that is the only other sort of additional staff considerations is that we will be reviewing a CSM later in the meeting that will be merging the parcels together. That's just to basically eliminate any possible setback conflicts or anything like that. And we have the 4 conditions for approval. Those are in endnotes. Those are all very small matters, especially considering what they improved over the past month. So, any questions?
Yeah, real quickly, that cement fence or concrete fence, is that going to be around the entire parcel, or is this going to be just the area that they're developing on the northeast side?
It's around the entire parcel. It's about 4,400 linear feet.
So all the way out to Highway 32, and okay.
Correct.
And the plans, I just pulled them up. We didn't get a chance, they submit them on Monday, so we didn't get a chance to formally amend the executive summary. But they are like a split-faced block-type pattern with a color that should match the existing and proposed building expansion. So it should comply. And with that screening, they're also adding what was it, like 70 trees or
90.
90 trees around
90
the
canopy trees.
border of the property. So that'll also help to soften that wall there, which is complying, as Robin said, with one of the screening options. So before it was kind of as submitted, it was a smooth concrete wall, and then they revised it to include the stamping pattern and the color.
Their decision, I mean, I don't want to speak for the applicant, but the decision to screen the entire site would sort of indicate that they plan on investing more into the site that would require additional screening in the future. So otherwise, you would just screen just the area that was required.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what's going on there as far as what the DNR is doing and what are the possibilities, and are we talking years or what are we talking about? So maybe the applicant can share a little bit on that too.
Okay, any other questions for me?
No.
All right.
Nope. Could the applicant come up? If we can get your name and address. Will the real applicant please stand up? Up, right up to the microphone there, because we're recording this and it's streaming it too as well. So name and address.
For the business,
Sure.
Megan Myers, 700 State Street, Racine, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Right now, this is our current plan that would carry us out 3 to 5 years. I believe that we are planning to do a boundary around the entire thing because the test track will have prototype equipment on it, so it's a security measure. So I think in the future, there may be additional work, but this will carry us out 3 to 5 years.
And there will be no signs anywhere, just the fence or the masonry wall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. There seems to be a lot of other land around it. Now, all the testing has been done so far? on that?
What's been done?
The testing?
The testing will be on the test track. I think the areas that you see are open. There is some plans in one of the boxes that you see for future planting, prototype planting, that because of the remediation that's been done on the site would purely be for testing purposes only. The rest of it is part of the cap that's being done with the WDNR for the remediation of the site.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Any public comment on this? Okay. Then I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to the Plan Commission approve Site Plan 20-22, subject to conditions regarding the lighting plan, landscape and screening plan comply with those divisions of the zoning code.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck. Thank you very much. Now that will go to,
Nowhere. That's done.
that's done, okay.
Well, contingent upon CSM passing those boards.
All right, next on the agenda would be Ordinance 34, 2022, a zoning map amendment for Old Green Bay Road, zoning map amendment ZMA 0622.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this application is directly related to the previous amendment for the comprehensive plan. They're formally applying to amend it from RE to B2. Again, believing that the intersection of two county trunk highways and the shallowness of the property make it unsuited for state residential development, more suited for neighborhood commercial development. We agree with that. This would be in coordination with comprehensive plan amendment that you just approved. So both of those will move forward to the village board next week for approval, and then for the zoning, a public hearing and formal approval. So it's kind of all a package deal. As a fiscal note, the application does not lie within a tax incremental district, and the applicant did not request any tax incremental financing as part of the project, and we have no conditions, so we recommend approval.
Any questions of Sam? Any public comment? Look for a motion.
I moved, Mr. Chairman, to recommend approval of ordinance 34-2022, a zoning map amendment for Old Green Bay Road, zoning map amendment ZMA-06-22.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll call a question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is ordinance 35, 2022, a zoning map amendment for 6915 Washington Avenue, zoning map amendment ZMA 2211.
Okay, this is pretty close by right here, and something that we've an area that we've talked about recently. But this is a zoning map amendment from the owner, Dynacon Investments, and the applicant is Pentex Restaurant Group. They are proposing to take the site from B2 to B3 in order to construct a Taco John's quick serve restaurant. The applicant requested the B3 zoning to allow for multiple drive-through lanes. Our regulations prohibit multiple drive-through lanes in the B2 district. Applicant did not apply for a site plan review with this application. So if approved, the applicant will come back with a specific site plan. They have, in your packet, they have submitted a preliminary site plan for you to sort of peruse. The property currently contains an animal hospital. The applicant plans to raise the animal hospital pending future site plan review. Thereafter, they plan to construct a 2,440 square foot single-story Taco John's. The application includes a preliminary proposed site layout, as I said, and it shows the 2 existing access drives from Prairie Drive to the site closed and 2 new access points replacing them. The plan provides pedestrian access to Washington Avenue and 29 parking spaces. The plan must meet stormwater management, landscaping, and screening requirements when the site plan goes through, especially along the south side of the site to provide a buffer between the restaurant and the adjacent residential zone. The Washington Avenue corridor in the development area is largely zoned B3 and some B2. The proposed map amendment matches the property to the east and properties across Washington Avenue. This case is much like our September last month map amendment that proposed a car wash, as both contained requests to amend B2 zones to B3 zones on a commercial corridor adjacent to a residential use. However, the car wash amendment also requested a conditional use, and the primary concern from both the neighbors and Plan Commission was vacuum cleaner noise. Also, the area near the car wash contained more residential units, whereas the area along Washington Avenue in this amendment contains other service commercial uses such as food and convenience stores, and only a few houses. Many of these uses serve Case High School throughout the day, and the village staff anticipate that the students and staff of Case High School would frequent this restaurant. I think they like, high schoolers, they kind of like tacos, right? Yeah.
Little?
I mean, they did when I went to high school, even though that was a long time ago. Yeah, Yeah. So this application does follow the comprehensive plan. Just a sort of a description of the B3 district. It's primarily intended to accommodate high-intensity commercial buildings along state trunk highways, county trunk highways, and local arterial street corridors and nodes. There are no overlay districts on this property. Basically, the B3 district would permit restaurants and bars and a drive-in and drive-through establishment by right. And so we're going to scroll down to fiscal impact, and this is just an estimation, but the property currently has an appraised value of $355,000. I know this might be a little gauche to compare Taco John's to a Taco Bell, but I felt that that was the closest approximation for other restaurants of that value. So Taco Bell on Washington Avenue and Green Bay Road has assessable value of $1.8 million. And the Taco Bell located next to Regency Mall in the city of Racine has assessable value of $988,000. Both locations are approaching or over 10 years old and have a much smaller dining room, and neither have a double drive-through. Therefore, the village staff would anticipate the redevelopment of the property would raise the assessed value to approximately $2 to $2.5 million. The property fronts Washington Avenue, which is State Trunk Highway 20, and the state's responsibility to maintain. The county handles annual maintenance and plowing duties, and the property does not lie with any tax incremental district, and no municipal financial incentives are tied to this project. And there was no request for any tax incremental financing. Lastly, just an additional staff consideration, and this is more to kind of guide preliminary site planning. to guide them for that future submission. But village staff recommend that the applicant consider a walk-up window and or patio dining area when submitting for site plan review. While the municipal ordinance doesn't really require one, staff suggested one to the Scooter's Coffee application and building across the street, and they did install one. And the village staff believe that both window and outdoor eating area would serve nearby Case High School customers very well on nice days. Would just basically make it a spot to have lunch outside, which would be nice. We don't have any recommendation or conditions for approval, and we move to recommend approval of Ordinance 3522 and recommending that to the village board. Any questions for me?
Okay. No questions for you.
No. I believe that the property owner and or applicant is here if they want to add anything, or if you guys have any questions of them.
Name and address, please.
Oh, there you go. How you doing? David Church, 6915 Washington Avenue. I'm the proposed new owner of the property, so I'm acting as the developer, working with the Taco John's franchisee. And I'm excited about the project. I think it's a natural fit for the corridor. This is my second project with the company, and I just trust that they're going to be very responsible in terms of their building design, landscaping to meet or exceed what the village is going to look for. And I think it'll be just a great addition to the corridor. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions of David? No. Okay.
Jeremy Wagner, Excel Engineering. We did the site plan, 100 Camelot Drive, Fond du Lac. I guess if you guys got any questions about the site plan or anything else.
I think without being able to see the final rendition, I don't know if we have any questions at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're going to come back to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're coming in.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Jeremy. Any further discussion on this? Any public comment? Okay, if not, then I would be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion the Plan Commission move to recommend approval of Ordinance 35-2022 and a zoning map amendment for 6915 Washington Avenue, along with the zoning map amendment ZMA-22-11.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Right, next. 12830 Kraut Road Comprehensive Plan Amendment, ZPA 22-3.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant applied to amend the village as part of the land use element to the multi-jurisdictional comprehensive plan for Racine County 2035 for approximately 188 acres between the East Frontage Road and Kraut Road from residential areas, including churches multifamily, to industrial business. Industrial was the master plan designation prior to the 2019 amendment to the comprehensive plan, which was approved by the Plan Commission and Village Board. The village staff have a specific concern that'll come up through this, which is in regards to utility service to the site. So the main thing we pointed out for our goals, objectives, and policies of the plan, one of the goals is encouraging development patterns that promote efficient, sustainable use of land that can be readily linked by transportation systems, both of which I think this does comply with, but utilizing existing public utilities and services, this would not comply with. So we'll get into water in a second. That's one of our major concerns. The proposed amendment will, we don't believe, would lead to any detrimental environmental effects. The development would obviously have to follow all applicable village, county, and state environmental regs. The Parks and Open Space Plan does not identify any of the property for protection. There are delineated wetlands on the property. However, they could not fill those without permission from the DNR. And there is also area in the northwest corner of the property that is subject to shoreline protections for a small intermittent stream that runs through that area. The village staff believe the amendment is partially compatible with the surrounding land uses. That's why this one is a little bit tricky. The eastern side of the property contains agriculture and residential uses, but the western side of the property contains industrial uses. Additionally, the Village of Caledonia has expressed interest in redeveloping the areas to the north with industrial uses, which is exemplified by the industrial development that's underway just south of Northwestern Avenue. currently under construction. So when looking at this, we're trying to balance kind of the interests of all the landowners and our neighbors to the north. The existing county local facilities service is adequate to serve the type of development associated with the amendment. And this is our major concern. The existing facilities are not adequate to serve the type of development. There is no adjacent water or sewer. And specifically Section 3H of the Intergovernmental Retail Water Service Agreement between the City of Racine and the Village of Mount Pleasant states, the village shall require new subdivisions and new commercial and industrial development within the Mount Pleasant service area to be connected to the Racine water system. CPA 22.3 lies within the Mount Pleasant service area, so therefore any development of the subject property should clearly indicate how the applicant plans to serve any commercial or industrial development with water. And from my reading of the agreement, that's whether or not the actual development needs water or not. To permit that type of construction, there should be adjacent water available. The village staff also believe the extension of Carrington Boulevard should eventually extend northwards from Kraut Road to intersect with Gulf Road on the east edge of South Hills Country Club. Any development of the subject properties should take this recommendation into consideration, which, if approved, would also help to provide some delineation between the industrial areas westwards along the frontage road and the residential eastwards along County Road V. So some sort of future public road, particularly Carrington as a collector, I think would be more of a natural boundary and help us feel a little bit better about permitting some industrial uses up there and give a little bit of buffer to the residential uses to the east. The village staff are hesitant to say if CPA 22.3 would enhance economic development within the county. The business park buildings described within the application would enhance economic development opportunities. However, the proposed auto storage lot, we don't believe would. The applicant indicated they would be open to a payment in lieu of taxes agreement, which is a pilot agreement commonly used with low value or non-taxable entities. However, the village does not have the ability to force the applicant to propose such an agreement. So they could propose it to us, but we can't force them to do it unless there was some sort of development agreement opportunity in there. Additionally, the village staff would need to know how much the anticipated pilot amounts would be before we could render an opinion on the validity of such a suggestion. I think it's a creative suggestion that we would certainly look at to help us kind of feel a little bit better about an auto storage lot or an auto auction lot. But again, it's all in the details, right? In their application, the applicant suggests the village distinguishes between parking lots and vehicle storage areas. Both are subsets of vehicular use areas. We read the statement to imply that the applicant doesn't believe large automobile storage lot would need to comply with the interior parking lot landscaping requirements contained within the landscaping section. We may differ on that opinion, but before we wanted to render an official legal opinion on that, regardless of the interior-exterior screening required or any pilot agreement for the taxes of the individual parcel, the village staff have some concern that an auto storage lot would lower the value of residential development opportunities specifically for the properties to the east. The proposed amendment is the proposed amendment in substantial agreement with the recommendations of the Regional Land Use Plan. Sewer PAC identifies some of the areas contained within the application as small lot, traditional neighborhood, residential, and other urban land, at least 4.4 to 6.9 dwelling units per net residential acre. Some of the lands as agriculture or other open lands. Sewer PAC describes small lot traditional neighborhood as a mix of housing types and businesses, with single-family homes on lots of a quarter acre or less, and multifamily housing found within and at the edges of cities and villages. With that, this is just the first step in the process, so that's kind of our preliminary reading of it. We recommend that the Plan Commission move to direct staff to send a copy of the proposed plan amendment to all adjacent local governments and other parties listed in the statutes, non-metallic mine operators and persons listed within the statutes as well, and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendment with the village board with the publishing of a Class 1 notice at least 30 days before the public hearing containing the information required under the statutes. That public hearing at this point would likely take place in early December, with the Thanksgiving holiday kind of throws off the last 2 months of our village board schedule. So I can answer any technical questions. In a large part, I think our summary would be like, we don't have too much of an issue with interstate adjacent industrial development, but we are skeptical of an auto auction site and the implications that would leave on adjacent properties and the village's taxable value for that property. And then the applicant should also be able to, upon public hearing, maybe next time they're at the Plan Commission, be able to more specifically answer how they plan to serve the properties with water. Residential areas under the retail water agreement are not required if they're large lot, kind of like a state lot, to be serviced by water if they're not part of a subdivision. So kind of, agriculture style density homes of greater than, 5 acres or more would be allowed in that corner, which is one of the reasons why we shifted it to residential areas in the previous plan, just because so far away from utilities, residential and ag is really the only thing that can be developed out there, at least from my reading of the intergovernmental retail water agreement. Any other questions for me?
Yeah, you mentioned that the extension of Carrington Way, is it?
Boulevard.
Yeah, Boulevard. Okay, sorry. Where on the map would that go, and is that something that we would do and put in a right of way in? I mean, I'm trying to.
Not as a part of this comprehensive plan process, but as a part of the future development, we'd certainly try to coordinate that, particularly if they were looking at larger industrial buildings. Serving those just off the frontage road would likely not be acceptable to either us or the DOT. So there would be some sort of public improvements required for industrial buildings in the northwestern portion. The location of that is essentially where Kraut Road kind of goes directly north-south before it kind of peels off to the northeast. That would just continue straight north towards Caledonia. So you kind of have a bisected Kraut Road, a north leg and a south leg, and then the vertical leg would be converted into Carrington Boulevard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to identify that. So where the elbow is just east of 94, that's going to be, that part of Kraut Road is going to become Carrington Boulevard. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah, it's pretty much directly in line with the existing Carrington Boulevard,
Sure.
like a mile to the south. So long-range planning, yes. How long it takes to get there, I mean, it's really development dependent and property owner dependent. There are some pretty large farm fields between Kraut Road and C, further to the south.
Mm-hmm.
So until those property owners were, wanted to sell off and develop their property, that connection might take a while to get there, but we want to plan for that to be kind of a connector, collector style roadway that is basically halfway between the frontage road and the interstate and V. So it lines up and spaces pretty well there.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't here last month, but isn't the Fred development got to be pretty close to that, right? Didn't you guys approve
For
that?
the zoning map amendment, yes, it is. It's further to the south along C, but
Right.
that would take Carrington Boulevard further north if they decide to move forward with that project.
Okay, so that is part of that project then?
We would require that it is. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions of Sam?
Yeah, I think before I get off the stage, this is one of the things that we think is really squarely in the purview of the Plan Commission. The questions that we like to pose to you is, what does the land use look like out here? We have a property owner who'd like to develop it as something other than planned residential use, but that kicks down some dominoes. So, I think it's not something we wanted to throw out, and is certainly worthy of a public hearing and serious consideration. Not just saying, nope, we're not going to change it, but a couple questions that still need to be answered, in our opinion.
Okay. So what you're looking to do is move this along in the process?
That would be our recommendation. We think it's worthy of that consideration.
Yeah, because we just moved it in 2019 to residential,
We did.
and now, 3 years later, we're going to make a change already? I don't understand that, but okay. At least not all of it. I mean, I understand along the frontage road, yes, there's spots for industrial buildings, but I think the best use, and again, as we outlined back in 2019, the best use is going to be residential for a large portion of this.
And I don't want to speak for the applicant too much. They're obviously here and can speak for themselves as well. So what they envision for the site and their ownership.
Okay, if there's no other questions of Sam, then if the applicant would like to come up, name and address, please.
Hi, everyone. Dan Hintz, Hintz, 7108 Highway 38 in Caledonia. So the 188 acres of the 460 total that I own is on the Mount Pleasant side. And like you just talked about, when I bought the property back in '08, the Mount Pleasant side on the comp plan was industrial. Foxconn came to town. I think you guys thought that there would be residential room there, and so did we, because that's the calls we were getting. But they sort of faded away now. So we're working with a national developer called Scannell Properties, who wants to develop it with warehouses on the whole 460 acres. So when you look, first step is to look at the comp plan. Well, Mount Pleasant side shows residential. So we are applying just to put it back the way it was. The auto storage, the vehicular storage, the auto auction, they had made a call, showed some interest. We haven't heard from them in weeks now, so I'm not getting excited about that. Don't really care for that use myself, although the piece they were interested in is right behind the junkyard. Would be screened very well. But you know, today we would just like to get the comp plan changed back. Then Scannell via Caledonia or with Caledonia will come back and, you know, with a site plan to get the rezone as they properly need it.
And to note that rezone, even if you approved this comprehensive plan amendment, that rezone is still legislative action subject to the Plan Commission's recommendation. So just because the property would be, have the allowance for industrial does not mean that you would have to approve an M3 zone request. For instance, you could say, no, this area is only applicable for M1 or M2, depending on the rezone request. So you're not backing yourselves into a corner, forcing a rezone in the future just by approving the comp plan amendment.
I think the total development square footage and warehouses is somewhere between 5 and 6 million square feet. Depending on how the economy turns out here, that could be done in 3 years or may take 7 or 8.
Yep, okay. Any other questions for Dan?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Any public comment? Yep, okay. Then I'd be looking for a motion on recommendation. And you want the full verbiage in that motion?
Oh, yeah.
If you can, otherwise you can just say move it to a public hearing.
Okay.
Per the executive summary is fine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to the Plan Commission move to direct staff to, 1, send a copy of the proposed plan amendment and its report to all adjacent local governments and other parties listed in section 66.1001 4B of the statutes, and to non-metallic mine operators and other persons listed in section 66.1001 4E of the statutes, and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendment with the village board, with the publishing of a Class 1 notice at least 30 days before the public hearing, and containing information required under section 66.1001 4D of the statutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'm gonna call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So, good luck. Thank you. All right. Now moving to 824th Street, Certified Survey Map CSM 2213. Robin.
So this is in pairing with the site plan that we discussed and approved earlier. This is to merge the 3 parcels for the Case property down on 24th Street. They applied to merge them all into one single parcel. This merge simplifies any redevelopment opportunities and removes the issue of internal property line setbacks, as well as accessory building requirements, so that the test track becomes an accessory use to the main building as opposed to being on its own site. The application follows the land use element of the comprehensive plan and meets the M2 lot size standards. And it It does not lie within any tax incremental districts, and we don't have any conditions for approval. This is largely on our suggestion that this get merged so that the overall site plan would be better. And
And it is.
it is.
Yes, okay, very good. Any questions for Robin? Any public comment? A motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the 824th Certified Survey Map CSM 22-13.
Oh, wait. Recommend approval to the village board.
Recommend approval to the village board, yes. And I was going to say, we normally see that in the recommendation, because there's some of these that we're allowed to approve by ourselves, and throughout the day here, we've had them where it's not recommended to the village board. So I don't know if earlier motions needed that statement in there.
It's implied. You don't have the power to
I know,
formally approve
but
them
again,
anyways.
it's nice to know whether we are actually approving it ourselves at our level, or if it's got to be approved by the board.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Yeah, I might have missed it on a couple of them, whether or not it was that actual verbiage.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch.
Second.
Motion and a second. All right.
Second.
No further discussion. I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck. Thank you. Nice presentation on this one now. All right, next will be 3801 Northwestern Avenue Site Plan Review SP 2224.
The applicant applied to build an additional parking area adjacent to the new lodge building containing 18 parking spaces. The parking area will take the place of 2 of the proposed paddleball courts from the original site plan application. The proposed parking area is greater than the 5,000 square foot requirement, thus it requires Plan Commission review. The application follows the comprehensive plan. The village does not have an adopted plan for local planning area 8. This application follows all the base district standards. This property is zoned P1, which is neighborhood public. This application complies with the use standards and all the village-wide regulations for it. Something I'd like to highlight that has been a positive development. We've got a lot of feedback in the last couple months about having cleaner executive summaries when they come to you, fewer conditions, things like that. And the OpenGov software that we're implementing has helped us kind of tackle these reviews in a more proactive manner. So this is one of those instances where the applicant, Dan Oakes, was great to, he made the changes right away, resubmitted them online. We're able to say, these look good, and provide you guys a clean executive summary. So process working as intended. The application meets Article 500 and 600 for administration procedures, measurements, and terminology. This property does not lie within a tax incremental district. The applicant did not request any tax incremental financing with the project. The current assessed value for the property is just over $1 million, which equates to about $6,000 per acre for the 163.2 acre golf course. The village staff do not anticipate the proposed development will affect the property's assessed value, although the previous lodge building hasn't hit the rolls yet because they kind of just completed it not that long ago. In the next year or so, that assessed value should go up in coordination with that lodge building hitting the rolls. The staff don't recommend any conditions for approval, and we recommend that you move to approve straight up this one, SP 2224.
All right, thank you, Sam. Any question for him? This is a site plan, so this is our approval. No questions? Any public comment? No? Okay. Be looking for a motion then?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve 3801 Northwestern Avenue Site Plan Review, SP-22-24.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. This is your favorite one coming up now. Let's move on to Ordinance 29, 2022, amending the Code of Ordinances, Village of Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, Chapter 70, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places.
Over time, the village urban forest canopy has increased in coordination with new public roadways, updated subdivision standards, and more consistent parks maintenance activities. Additionally, the village increasingly finds itself in an increasingly connected Milwaukee-Chicago region where it must compete on quality of life amenities to keep up and attract residents. The village strategic plan includes a 2022 goal to explore the opportunity for the village to see Tree City USA designation. The Tree City USA program is sponsored by Arbor Day Foundation in coordination with the USDA Forest Service and the National Association of State Foresters. And it supplies direction, technical help, public attention, and national recognition for urban and community forestry programs in thousands of towns and cities in more than 135 million Americans call home. Comparable Wisconsin communities to Mount Pleasant that have Tree City USA designation include Beloit, Brookfield, Franklin, Greenfield, Kenosha, Manitowoc, Menominee Falls, Milton, Monroe, Oak Creek, Oconomowoc, Racine, Watertown, Waukesha, Wauwatosa, West Allis, and West Bend, among many others. We're pretty late to the party. Some of these, there are cities like La Crosse that have been part of Tree City USA for over 30 years, and then there are some that have only joined in the last couple of years, so best time is now. There are 4 standards for Tree City USA designation, which kind of started this whole process. One is a tree border department. The village staff proposed the Public Works Department would oversee tree management. However, the Parks and Recreation Manager, George, would oversee when trees lie within public parks, and through him, you all, for major projects in parks. This is, as a note, has already gone through the Public Works Committee as well, so we are coordinating with our friends in Public Works. Public Tree Care Ordinance, the village staff changed a model ordinance provided by the Arbor Day Foundation to fit the needs of Mount Pleasant. The community development staff, public works staff, and the village attorney reviewed the proposed ordinance. They grant staff authority for management, sets tree planting care standards, prohibits harming public trees, sets landowner responsibility for tree maintenance within the adjacent public rights-of-way, and defines nuisance trees, a little bit better than our current nuisance tree standards. One of the other requirements is that the village spends at least $2 per capita on trees every year. Next year's budget does increase the Parks Department budget to have about 25% of the required spending, which is just under $17,000. And then the Public Works Department is going to increase its share, which is closer to 75% of the required in the next budget year or two to keep up with that. The village total spending for us to apply would have to be just under $58,000 a year on trees. Right now, we spend about 10, so this is like a 5-fold increase in how much we're spending on tree care and maintenance. But as I said before, with the increase in street trees across the village, urbanized road sections, the business park development, most of that have street trees. So we think it's warranted. In talking with Tony, we think that the village would use funds to replace and add trees within the park system. Public Works would use the increased funds to replace and add trees within village rights-of-way, mostly coordinating with the annual paving program to minimize disturbance to residents. So when we're already closing down and tearing up their streets, potentially on urban cross sections, we could go in and add some street trees for those property owners as well. And something that I got feedback on from the Public Works Committee that I want to reiterate here is that would not mean that we're just going to do it and not tell the adjacent residents of their new responsibilities. That would involve public outreach and coordination. So we're not just dropping a brand new responsibility on someone in front of their house and then not talking to them about it at all. That'll come with public education, as well as most of the tree planting programs have about a year warranty. So Public Works and the companies that install them will be involved at least for that first year to make sure that they take over a winter and things like that.
Is that something like in other communities where they would allow the homeowner to choose the type of tree from a list that we would provide?
Potentially. Yep, we haven't developed the program yet, but we could look at things like that. We try to be environmentally sensitive and reference kind of pre-development standards and what was where before humans got here. So certain areas had more stands of maples and things like that. Certain areas had better stands of oaks. There are other areas that had more like younger forest standards, like birch trees and stuff that aren't really good public street trees. So there is a limiting factor there. We also try not to include too many ornamental trees in the right-of-way because they tend to grow shorter. Where we're looking more for canopy-style trees in the rights-of-way. Certain other ones are not salt-tolerant, so it does limit there. But there's a pretty wide standard now with hybridization and botany where it is. You can have a pretty good mix. Obviously, we're not going to do the days of old where it's like in a complete street of elm trees or ash trees that get diseased. We try to mix it up, but not respectful to the conditions of the area as well.
Good.
Finally, in terms of an Arbor Day observance and proclamation, we would have to celebrate Arbor Day with tree plantings. We would just coordinate that with George, likely in the parks once a year, whether it's Smolenski Park or a different area that we're doing tree plantings. I know we've done those kind of ad hoc in the past before, so this would be a good goal to keep us honest and do it every year. And with George here, I have no doubt that it'll be nice. So, getting into the ordinance itself, it is an update to Chapter 70. If you have any specific questions, I can answer them, but it largely does what I previously described, set authority and power. That largely lies with Public Works Director and myself, and then staff who we designate to go and maintain and take care of trees. And then the village administrator can also delegate other people to enter private premises at any time to examine trees. That's mostly in relation to nuisance or trees that are a danger to the general public. Tree planting and care standards are contained within there. In a large part, it separates trees into two classes. That's ornamental, which are 20 feet or less, and canopy, which are 20 feet greater. Property owners will have the right to plant trees if they don't already have them. And say there's not a village project that's going to plant one, but you live in Heartland Village and want to go plant a tree in the parkway in front of your house, this will grant you the authority to do so with a permit. We'll have a list of approved trees that they can plant. They can just choose one and go do it after calling Digger's Hotline and submitting a permit. Or if they want to ask special permission for a specific kind of tree, they'll be able to do that as well. Most of that permitting will go through the Public Works Department unless it's on parkland. Then obviously it goes through Community Development, you, George, etc. There's a prohibition against harming public trees. People won't be able to top them to try to get that canopy. Hang stuff from them, all that kind of stuff. Pretty reasonable. Just don't mess with the public trees. Minor types of maintenance activities that would be in front of a private property owner's home are allowed, so minor trimming or treating for pests, things like that, as long as it didn't kill the tree or severely limit its growth in any way. It sets adjacent owner responsibility for maintaining those trees. In large part, however, Public Works Department still does have the authority to go and maintain public trees as well, so we're not abdicating our responsibility, we're just sharing it with adjacent property owners. That's pretty common in most communities that have more significant street trees. One of the things I'd like to call out is that trees are considered obstructions if they cross any sidewalk, multi-use path, curb, street, or other pedestrian or vehicular area 15 feet or below in height. So that sets, issues when there's drive aisles and things like that in the future. So we're really letting the trees grow up and then out. And then finally, it declares certain trees a nuisance, so we can go in and remove those trees, and then property owners have the duty at their own expense to remove or treat nuisance trees on their private property. And the village can remove trees at the owner's expense if the owner does not comply with treatment and removal as specified within the village. This doesn't happen that often, but every now and then, tree gets hit by lightning, it's obviously dead or dying or a danger to fall on a neighbor's property. Neighbor complains, I don't want to spend a couple $1,000s to clean up my own problem, even though it's, an act of nature, it is kind of just part of being a property owner, right? And so we do have the authority to go in, and Public Works can order that person to, trim or maintain that tree, so it's not a threat. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time it's a private property dispute, but if it is like of imminent danger, we could go in and do it ourselves.
Okay.
That's the long and short of it. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
You were just talking about damaged trees and that. Now, if they're in the village right away, then we're responsible for cleanup then, correct?
Generally, yes. Like if there's a big storm or things like that, Public Works would go out and do that. The adjacent property owner can do that. If it's just like a minor branch is broken, I'm going to cut that off, that kind of thing. But I would caution that, property owners to be careful as they would any public thing like a sidewalk if it got damaged in front of your property. don't cut down a tree that you might think is damaged, but an actual arborist might feel differently. So it's always best to just double check if you're concerned and it's a public tree. But yeah, if there's one branch broken off from like a windy day or something, that's fine to go take that off.
Okay.
If there's an opportunity for a memorial tree to be planted by private funds in a park, would that offset the $2 deal?
Yeah, all it does is require that the village spends that. So in that respect, we would take in a donation and then be able to expend those funds. So bring it on. If people want to donate memorial trees or stands of trees or anything like that, we already have a bench donation process that's set up to basically handle those.
Cool, good.
So what I emphasized at Public Works is this is really just part of us kind of growing and urbanizing as a community. We have more urban cross-section roads, so we were going to come into these regulations sooner or later. Now's the time we find ourselves at that point.
Well, this is great work, it really is.
Yep.
Any questions, further questions?
You don't need a formal motion on this one. It wasn't publicly noticed as a zoning text amendment or anything. So typically we give these a first reading in front of you guys. If you're largely good with it, we'll kind of run it by everyone for a final pass, bring it forward next month for a final approval.
I'm very happy we're doing this, so that's good.
Yep.
I think that's the consensus of the commission here.
I've already approved it once, so.
All right, good.
Cool. Well, you'll see it back and we'll move it through the formal approval process in the next month then.
All right. And we'll move on to ordinance 38, 2022, amending the Code of Ordinances, Village of Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, Chapter 58, Parks and Recreation.
So this is largely a similar effort just in Chapter 58 for Parks and Rec. It was largely stemmed by us, as we've discussed before, cleaning up some of the canine-related ordinances within the village. This, as opposed to a lot of the recent discussion, is more relation to when dogs are allowed on public parkland, as opposed to dealing with violent dogs that went through the village board already. So this is just in relation to that private or the public parkland. We thought it was a good opportunity as well, now that we have George kind of in here and he's been in here a couple of years, a good time as any to clean up the rest of the park ordinances. So I'll go through those in general and then turn it over to George to talk about the dog-specific changes. So first, we split out park hours and set them at the top of the agenda, or at the top of the ordinance. The Plan Commission shall set the hours of operation for parks and public recreation areas, and George will post signs giving notice of operational hours at all the village parks. Prohibited activities, this was a good portion of the changes in here to kind of clean up and simplify these. Some of them, such as litter, were already contained within other ordinances. Littering is already illegal in the village, so restating it within public parks was kind of needless at that. But littering is still illegal, so you can't go and dump stuff in village parks. Animals is cleaned up to reference 58.3, which is the dogs portion that George will get into. Section 3, which is in relation to weapons, that was mostly cleaned up in relation to a recent ordinance that the village attorney Chris brought through in relation to the discharge of weapons in the village, so we just reference those new sections of the code. It's 54-1 and 54-1B, A and B. Fireworks were already prohibited in the village, so they are still prohibited in public parks. We just took that out because they're already prohibited here, except for very minor ones like snakes and sparklers and stuff like that. Cleaned up some of the driving and operating of motor vehicles on pathways and things. That's still in large part prohibited, except where posted that it's applicable. Disorderly conduct, again, already illegal, so we took that out because it's referenced in the PD section of the Code of Ordinances. For bottles, we cleaned that up to specifically reference glass containers as opposed to just bottles, being that they're kind of varied these days. They can't cause or build any fire except in the designated areas, and that they properly dispose of ashes. They can't trespass or go into any locked or closed off building with that, particularly if they're posted. They can't sell or vend any merchandise without written consent of you all. That's generally through a special event permit that you all are approving.
I've got a quick question, if I can. Go back to the building a fire of any kind. I believe that, and again, is that something that can be done for special events?
Yes, we would
Okay.
allow them, and that's generally tied to in designated fireplaces provided for such purpose. So if they did want to do a fire, obviously we're not going to like permit a bonfire in the park, but we would if someone said, hey, we're going to bring out this solo stove type thing and place it on concrete and it's going to be part of our winter event here, you could approve that through a special event. It would just have to be contained within that designated area per the permit.
Yeah, because I believe we were doing it when we had the Relay for Life. They do it at that moment, so I'm assuming that we're allowing permits for that then. Okay.
Yeah. Post any notice or sign in public park areas without written consent of you all. That's both A, for advertising purposes. Sometimes people post stuff on public lands without our permission. And that is also, sometimes people lose track of where property lines are. If you have a wooded lot that butts up against a public park, this happens up in Smolensky. Sometimes there's stuff that meanders across the property lines. Sound devices, that was all cleaned up without written consent of you. Similar case to fires, you all can permit, such as Relay, they can play outdoor music. It just has to be permitted through a special event. They can't play any games like softball, baseball, football, or anything except on locations specifically designated for those purposes. So play fields, actual softball fields, things like that. This isn't us trying to be harsh. It's just as we have gone through the parks, there are plenty of play fields out there, so we don't think any kids are going to be prohibited from playing. But there are areas where we're trying to naturally introduce more plants and natural areas to the parks. We don't want people like going through those.
Yeah, I just want one comment there because, and I know George is a soccer coach, and I used to soccer coach the little ones, and it's hard to take a kid out to a big field. So you pick a spot in any park, you put up your little pop-up nets, and you have the swarm going. The kids, yeah, and they're not really doing any damage. And hopefully that's because technically that wouldn't meet the requirement here. So it's.
It just depends on what's labeled as a play field. Like, to use Campus Park as an example, the great lawn, this is essentially to protect that area, because that is not a dedicated play field. That's not what the primary purpose of that is. But general play areas, to give an example like Sheridan Woods, that whole grass area would be allowed because it's a general play field. Same for, I think, James Turk, Dirksey, we consider a play field. So theoretically, you could still do a practice out there. It doesn't make it okay.
Yeah, and again, but the Rhodes Park is one that's probably a gray area because it's probably a softball diamond, if you will, or field, but that's really the only flat area that, again, I know that area because I used to take the kids there and we would have our practices.
Yeah, and this isn't going to say, like, we're obviously not going to send out the cops to ticket people for their kids playing in certain areas. We will do our best to be as proactive as possible. Natural areas, if they're still growing, they'll be kind of cordoned off or fenced off or noticed, things like that. We just wanted to kind of protect those areas that were, if someone does go in and with intent harms one of those areas, we have something to back it up.
Okay.
Moving forward, the variance section got moved to later on. I'm going to skip over the dog section, leave that to George. So 58-4 is in required to variances. We kicked that to the Board of Appeals, as we do all our other variances. If someone wants a variance for a specified time to the restrictions set forth in the chapter, that's like above and beyond a special event permit. So that's something like, I want to use Droz Park at night for 3 weeks or something like that. That kind of goes above and beyond a typical use or a weekend use scenario. And then finally, violations and penalties. We just cleaned that up a little bit, but that references the standard penalties section of the code on the whole. That's generally $500 plus court costs. So with that, I'll turn it over to George to talk about dogs.
Thanks, Sam. And as the watermark indicates, this is all draft at this time, so that's why we're bringing it to you guys, taking the feedback before we would even want to present it to village board. So we really wanted to stress cleaning up kind of what has been allowed already in the parks, and then what is essentially my recommendations for us to do going forward for canines. So we didn't have anything that addressed service dogs in any of the parks. So with some of these changes, we've been able to address that. We're still pretty restrictive on what is allowed. So big thing is to address that the pathways and trails that dogs are permitted to be on there. Now we know that there are signs on the pathway, Pike River pathway right now, that indicate that dogs are allowed. If you really want to read per the ordinance, there really was nothing in there, or it was very gray to make sure that that was an approved use of the pathway. So we wanted to clean that up. We put in a 20-foot restriction for a number of different park amenities, which will keep the dogs primarily to the locations that we want them. So parks, pathways, trails. So can't be near a shelter, can't be near the ball diamonds, can't be near pavilions, those types of things, the pickleball courts. So we have, specific things called out here to, again, keep the dogs within certain parts of the park and away from where highly populated people as well. So just reading through here, we gave my position the approval to be able to post signage. So if we find that somebody is having dogs in a certain area that becomes problematic, we may put up, it gives me the permission to put up temporary, signs or anything that would say, no dogs allowed in this particular area, and we can come back and reevaluate whether or not we need to come back and formally address it with more ordinance changes, or if we can proceed with it as it was. So, or if there's any other reason that we would need to put up any sort of no dogs allowed sign, it does give us staff approval to be able to do that, instead of waiting in another month to come to you guys and say, hey, can you give me permission to go ahead and do this? So there is a little bit more staff level allowances here. The special event aspect is still in there, so any special event that would like to have a dog would still need to come through the process of submitting their special event application, signifying a letter for request, and it would come here for approval. So still no dogs allowed at any special events without approval. And then it just reflects the fees and charges for any of the violations. So I think I covered the majority of the things that are in there, so I'll open it up to specific questions or any feedback.
George, the on the pathways or the trails and stuff like that, now you allow dogs, but are you gonna require a leash for them, or are they gonna?
Yeah, there is a leash requirement in there.
Okay.
And we can go more specific with that too. There are ordinances that I have seen that said they must not be a retractable one. They must be at 6 feet in length, and I'm completely open to those kinds of. I mimicked a lot of this off of what the city of Madison does for theirs, and then I took bits and pieces from some of the other municipalities to come up with one that I thought fit the needs of our village.
Yeah, I have my notes here, and max of 6 feet is a recommendation I think is a good one.
Yep.
We run into that issue out on the Pike River pathway all the time with these extended things, and people won't pull their dogs in. They're walking on one side and their rope is across the pathway on the grass, and we're on our bikes. We're like, okay, we gotta wait for you to pull your dog in, So,
Yeah.
And obviously there's ones that don't use the leash either, but
Correct.
that's something that we always try to address nicely with them and say, hey, it is required out here, but and that's one of them. I'm not sure 20 feet's enough. And then you start talking about special events. Are you talking about, for instance, if at some point we decide to move forward with a beer garden, obviously specifically for Campus Park or whatever, is that a special event that's going to be required then at that point in time? Because otherwise, people can walk through the park on the pathway. They can be there while there's I'll call it a special event on. And that's one of the things that gets to be, it's happening out of Franksville right now.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people who have dogs, and there's a lot of people who don't want them there. I'm not one that likes a dog next to me while I'm eating my Mexican taco and having a beer, because the dog is sitting there panting. It's like, sorry, I just don't want you here. You know?
Correct.
I'm sorry. And the other thing too is if we have a group and use the band shell, the grass area, again, they could take a dog into that grass area and it would be around people and they would be meeting the letter of the law, if you will, that they're not 20 feet away from, any building. They're sitting out in the middle of the grass, but they're with people right next to the dogs.
And that's something that we can, tailor specifically to us, since we do have the designation of what that amenity of the Great Lawn is. We could prohibit it from that specific location. And that's the kind of feedback that I'm looking for, is stuff like that. We have a splash pad now, so we specifically put not near the splash pad, the picnic shelters. So we can get as detailed with some of these things that are unique amenities to us. But we want to keep some stuff general, like athletic fields, because then that gives us, again, more restrictions, of what an athletic field is, whether it's softball, baseball, soccer, cricket. So, I think.
And then I guess the next thing is to talk with Chief Matt Owens as well. Who's going to enforce this, and what is the enforcement rule? How do you handle that when you're out there? Because a lot of people, and myself included, you can be intimidated by people with a dog that they don't want to hear what you have to tell them, that, hey, by the way, you're not following the rules here.
And we, at a previous job, we had a dry erase board, and my office outlooked a park, and we would mark who description and this is the leash around neck guy or whatever it was, and then the animal control would pop into our office and say, have you had any violations? I saw this animal control do a full sprint chase to give somebody a ticket for it. Do we need to go to that extent? I don't know, but rolling out, I think it's also just the public that isn't aware of what is and what's not allowed. We could indicate on all of our publications what the actual fine is, and perhaps that would help dissuade people from violating it. But I think, again, the root of this is for clarity and to try to make it easier for people to understand, to know what they are allowed and not allowed to do. And with our commitment to pathways and trails throughout our village, I think it's really important that we at least, from a minimum, get that in here and address that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Now, Sam, you mentioned earlier there's already a fine section for fines and that in here. So I would assume that if this section gets put in as written, or as when we finalize it, that would also fall under that same fining or category?
It does, and that section also gives a little bit of leeway for the officer or the ticketing requester, myself, George, et cetera, to flex that in number. It's up to $500. So, if it's just a minor thing, but it does require a ticket, we can certainly go lower. But typically we stick to that $500 ones, because we try to not write tickets until it's really a problem. Sure. So if someone is a habitual, dog walker that's constantly allowing 3 dogs without leash, and we get a bunch of complaints, they'll probably get a ticket after they've been warned a couple of times. So it's that type of scenario where we really try not to ticket until we absolutely have to keep someone from violating the law.
And there are no restrictions as to dog breeds?
I have not specifically seen that anywhere,
Okay.
but it's something we could perhaps look into. Yeah, I have not personally seen that before.
All right.
Yeah, I think you need to look at your section numbering and do a little editing, because the little bitty section sign appears in front of everything except 58-4, and you have 2 58-3s. So it's a little less confusing if you figure out what exactly that would be. But yeah,
Yeah, that's probably the track changes thing, just getting a little confused. So we'll clean up on, we'll incorporate your comments on the dog section, and if the other ones look good, we'll have it cleaned up in an adoptable draft for you all next month.
Good, that's good stuff.
Any other questions?
Oh, one of the final things I wanted to highlight that I did skip over is the fee and charges scenario. That largely is not related to violations or penalties. Fees and charges are related to how much we're charging for special events and things like that. What this ordinance does is clean up and put that in the same place that all the other fees and charges exist in the ordinance. Those are typically adopted by resolution, and then you guys see them typically about every 2 years for updates, just so that we stay current. So this is just kind of co-locating that. We'll have that proposed cleanup as a package of this for you next month as well.
Yeah, and we will likely have the proposed 2023 fee schedule either in the November or the December meeting before the end of the year. So,
Good deal. All right, anything else there, George? You're gonna?
no, I mean, if there's any notes that anybody wants to give me, between now and the next meeting, please feel free to send them to me.
No, it looks good.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. All right, so Campus Park update. We are wrapping up with the majority of the project here. We have our punch list scheduled for a week from today to go through. We're going to be handling the majority of the outer parts of the park, so the pathways, the landscaping, the play fields, everything like that. We have run into We Energy's issue to get power to the building. We've got pushed back until the third week of November to be able to get service and also some panel issues for the actual boxes out there. So in lieu of what has happened, we will have to go through just a winterization of the building rather than opening it. We were going to have a limited amount of opening anyway, but with talking with the construction company and recommendations from them, it's better for us to winterize the whole building and open up partial parts of the park once we wrap up with the punch list and the items that are suitable for opening. So I'll cover that a little bit more here, but I'll run through a couple of these photos just so you guys can see. We got the band shell lighting up, and then you can see a lot of the grading and tree planting in the picture to the right. More trees being planted. All of the concrete work is done. All of the asphalt work is done, aside from a couple of areas near the parking lot, a couple connection areas where we still need to get trucks through. Bathroom lighting, partitions, those are all just about done. Here you can see some hydro seeding and where blanketing was done out at the cricket pitch and soccer fields. There's some of the concrete work that was still being done leading up to the main access drive there from the parking lot. This is in the left picture is in the concession area, so they're finalizing a lot of the millwork in there. And here's a picture of one of the dugouts. So all of the fencing is done. We still have to get some player benches bolted to the concrete, and they still have to do that 24-foot protective netting that's on the third base side of the north diamond that kind of protects any balls from going over into the great lawn. So. Again, a lot of seed and blanket going on throughout a good chunk of the facility. So as it relates to opening, what we are working with our fencing company, we will likely fence in the great lawn, the building, the cricket soccer pitch area, and leave all of the outer pathways available for use, all the basketball courts, all of the shelters, the playground, the pickleball courts, those would all reopen here for the duration of the winter. And as we approach the springtime, we'll try to get in there as soon as we can to get everything turned on to be able to get the bathrooms suitable for opening. We were already going to fence some of the grass areas to help with growth in the spring to prevent anybody from, like Joe said, those soccer coaches who find any green space to get out there and protect those areas that we want to make sure that the growth is good. But all of our plantings, all of our perennials, everything will be in here in the next week. The basketball courts will be coated and lined. So it's disappointing about the bathroom aspect of it here for the winter, but it's in the best interest of the facility as a whole to proceed that way. So we're targeting, I believe it's that first Saturday in June for our official grand opening, just based on the recommendations. I mean, we'll see. We might be able to open like soft opening in spring here for some of the areas, depending on that growth. But that's where we'll plan for a grand opening celebration for the actual park. And that really hasn't changed much. I think I had talked previously about that Memorial Day date of when we thought we'd have full access and use of everything out there. So, the softball diamonds will remain locked. We have all of those are gated, so we can prevent individuals from getting in there as well. So, as we continue to open more and more of the park throughout the spring here, we'll be able to keep people off where we don't need them.
Was the problem with We Energy's specs on equipment, or?
It's a little bit of both. There was a changeover in staff from our account manager in August that may have had part to do with a delay in paperwork where they thought we didn't have it in, but we did. They indicated that some of the storms that had come throughout late September, early October was impacting crews, various, as far as, we were pretty blessed throughout this entire project with very minimal issues. We have an overhead door issue that, we ordered several months ago that is still not in. So they have wood boards up to secure the building. So, that wasn't scheduled to be in on October 26th for that punch list, so the building wouldn't have been able to open anyway for that. So fire alarm equipment was scheduled for like the second week of November. So there is some stuff here and there that wouldn't have affected occupancy, aside from like that door that I mentioned, which is supposed to go in on Halloween, but yeah. Okay. We just didn't see a need to turn the water on, blow it out. We could theoretically open in December when all of that material is in. The amount of use that we're going to have, especially when we're still trying to keep people off of certain areas, we'll be taking down some of the pickleball court nets anyway, and so you're looking at maybe pickleball usage, playground usage, and that's about it, and pathways. So if we can service them with the portable restroom like we have over the last couple of years, I think that's the best alternative that we've got at this point.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing it the right way. Absolutely.
That kind of enthuses me. You're saying you're going to keep these are going to be heated then and open year round, the bathrooms?
Yes.
Oh,
that was part of the whole part of the plans from the start, that those building would be heated. Every single door has a keypad lock on it. Okay. So if we felt the need that the only bathrooms that we needed to keep open during the dark days of winter were the ADA buildings, we could do that. So that way we don't have to worry about cleaning other bathrooms. So yeah, it's the benefits outweigh the risk of opening when in December for minimal use that we'll probably see through January and March. Sure. So.
No, but that's a nice option. I know Pets has one. They keep one open, which is down by the dog park there by the beer garden, and that's nice to have because we hike in the wintertime, and it's nice to be able to go someplace.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Good. All right.
Excellent.
Just a couple more updates from myself. We have signed an agreement with myrec.com. It's a recreation software program that's going to bring us up to the 21st century here as far as handling registration, facility reservations, payment processing, having the ability to actually take credit card payments for park reservations. So we are we're in the middle of an onboarding process right now, so we're in the second or third week of that. The idea is that we will have this new software online ready to go the first week of December, which will give essentially a month for people to create their family households, browse the website, have a better idea of what we are going to do for how they can reserve picnic shelters or any other of the facilities. As we're going through this process, we still may hold off on that official launch of it until like February and still handle our initial rush of people who come, outside the doors for that January 2nd or 3rd to get their park reservation in for their company picnic. So that's still up for a little bit of discussion here, but it's been about a year and a half in the making, going through various different softwares to see what will suit us. The cost is very, in my mind, minimal compared to some of these other softwares to get us to where we need to go. We included it in our existing parks budget, so it didn't increase the budget for any of the additional benefits that we're going to get. So, and I've worked with finance and the clerks and everybody else who would be affected by something like this, and they've sat in on all the webinars for the respective softwares, and they're on board. So we're really excited about it. Communications department's helping us with banners and graphics for it. So
is that going to be a standalone website, or is that going to be?
Yeah, it's kind of like a satellite website. So it is our own unique, specific website to us. But it's the whole software is web based. So anybody who's handling stuff from the front desk or whatever, we just give them usernames and passwords and they can access it anywhere. So it also gives us a lot of flexibility too. We can designate, if we ever want to give like our playground leaders, for instance, access to it, we can limit their capabilities, but they can get in quickly to say, oh, do I need this class list for an emergency contact for whatever reason? We can print specific rosters and attendance sheets and all sorts of facility calendars. Again, I don't have to manually do all of my contracts for names and addresses. It will automatically populate for me. And so, yeah, it's a lot to take on, but it's timing it with the launch of Campus Park and everything. It seems to make the most sense. So,
All right.
Just as a note to that, that'll be part of a kind of larger relook at the village website and all that. That's up for review next year, so that'll come from Lisa and community engagement. But this will just be a portion of that.
Good.
and then the last thing is this Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. we have our trunk or treat event in the South Lot here. Should be the last year that we have it here with Campus Park, so we'll end up moving it there for 2023. But working with the PD, the Alumni Association, so they're helping out with volunteers, and we've got I think at least 25 vendors so far. We did put our end date for last Friday, but we may be able to squeeze in a couple if anybody else wants to put in a tent. But it's a very well attended event. I think we had over 1,000 people last year come through. So so we're excited that last year here, and then we can blow it out even more next year.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Robin? And are you available for signatures later?
Yeah, I'm giving out some autographs. I had several people message me and then be like, wow, that was about the business journal. That piece is so flattering. Did you pay them? I was looking to see the sponsored content somewhere on there, and I was like, no, I don't do that. I mean, if I was like, it's a good idea though. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was kind of a big deal and a pleasure to do. And it's only because I'm outspoken and loud and, all of those things that come with drawbacks. But that's why I got that interview. People think I'm interesting outside of work and it. And there's also activism and stuff. Anyway, other things that we're doing. This is staff issued permits. And this is actually kind of cool because this is a lot easier to do now that we have the online permitting software. This took like 3 clicks to do to kind of show you guys what's been going on. So we have an administrative adjustment that was approved for the Tivoli Green Section 2 that was basically for setbacks adjustments, some zoning compliance permits for those different addresses, and a couple of zoning request letters, which are just basically, hey, what's the zoning, what can be done here for this particular address. Usually those are the first foray into land being acquired or looked into. Those will be like your due diligence kind of requests. So think of those as a ping on any of those properties whenever that pops up. So those are the completed records. With active records, those are the ones that are about to go out, as far as some sign permits and a zoning compliance permit. And these are municipal complaints. So, okay. This is a big change from what you guys used to see. What you used to see was just mine. This now includes Lindsay and Teresa's. So all of the grass weeds complaints, they're all on here. I wish I need to figure out a way to kind of display what the subject matter of each of these are. But for example, of the completed one, I think there's only 3 or 4 that had me in it. And then on the active ones, the same deal. So yeah, a lot of weed complaints. And some other stuff like, like for example, the one on Durand is about somebody selling lawnmowers. So yeah, got a lot of work to do. Luckily, it kind of cleans it up, and I got the system so it issues violation letters almost automatically, but it's a process. Any questions about any particular property? Maybe I know what's going on there.
Campus Drive.
Oh, I think that actually might be an error, and somebody was just basically had a general complaint or question about like a policy in the village, and so it just got logged in as Campus Drive. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Robin.
So last one up with the holidays, I just wanted to go through the last 2 months of meeting schedules. The proposed schedule for November would be the 16th. I wanted to make sure that was okay with everyone. That's actually moving it a week forward, but figured the day before Thanksgiving would be bad for everyone. So unless anyone has any objections, we'll just roll with the 16th at 1. Being the time of year it is, we're not expecting a very large agenda for either of these from the application side. Most of what we expect to come in will be year-end reports in December, and then kind of zoning text, cleanup, that kind of housekeeping stuff over the next 2 months, with the odds and ends projects. And then December would be the 21st. That's a few days before Christmas, so I just wanted to make sure that was okay with everyone. If we move it up the week before, it's really early in the month based on how the month lies, so we're just going to stick with the 21st there. But that is the end of the year schedule, so we look forward to seeing you in the next 2 months.
All right. Item G.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.